NBA basketball fans, welcome back to the NBA Playoff Banter podcast. And, there's not much to talk about. It's been pretty slow this second round. Psych. Obviously, I'm kidding. He's Marshall. I'm Chris. And we're to break down before last night 3 out of the 4 semifinal series being tied 2-2. Now, obviously, Durant, his club with the decoy out there in Harden, to get the job done somehow, some way. He went off last night. Kevin Durant did. He put those blogger boys in their place, I guess he would say. And it's just right when you think, Milwaukee's got something figured out, they're giving Giannis the ball in the high post, or God forbid in the full-on post, so he's closer to the hoop, so he doesn't have to get a running start from 50 feet away while Blake's off of him like 15 feet. But anyway, I think you know where we're going with it. Giannis in the Milwaukee Bucks in general as a whole melted down the stretch. Their offense was just ugly. Their star player, at some point we're going to have to take him out of the top 5 if this continues to happen. I know that's blasphemy because he's a hell of a player, but I've just never seen this happen to this level where the guy can't even get to the free throw line. He's afraid. That's like saying Shaq doesn't want the ball in the post because he's garbage free throw. It's just crazy. But anyway, there are some other games that we're going to discuss. We will start with game 5 last night, obviously. We're talking about that. But then we're going to go over to where there's more drama, too, in those Monday night games as well. And then as we I'm talking about Philly and the Hawks who snuck one out. Speaking of a squad that probably should have been able to win that one. And then obviously the Clippers and the Jazz. The Clippers really, it looked like they got something figured out, but the injury bug keeps coming in. Kawhi Leonard is done for this series, at least it sounds like. It was kind of weird at that 4-minute mark or whatever, a little over 4 minutes, they took him out of that game. That wasn't won just yet. You generally wouldn't do that. I was like, are they just trying to – is this like an analytics thing that's telling him sit him with 4 minutes left and he'll be fresher for the next game? Or, I'm not a blog boy, so I don't know. And come to find out there was and he did hold his knee a little bit. So you kind of thought, did he bang it up? Are they being safe? Well, now we have our answer. There is going to be a Chris Paul appreciation rant / segment later in the show. And just like bad luck Chris Paul, the dude's got a case of the COVIDs. We're going to talk about that. Hopefully, knock on wood, he's vaccinated, so hopefully this will shrink and maybe he won't even miss time. Who knows? But all sorts of shit happening. I mean, it's really no surprise how many injuries we've had if you look at the shortened, off season. If you look at some of these squads that were in the bubble, deep in the bubble, how they played, and then the 72 games and 147 nights or whatever. This is the most all-stars in NBA history to be injured, and we're not even in the conference finals. This is freaking crazy. But you know what? It has been fun. Like I mentioned, 2 out of 2 for 2-2. We even got a sweep that we didn't see coming. Not that that's great or whatever, but, we got a sweep where you're like, holy shit, dude. They just swept them. Now, obviously, Jokic leaving that game helped that sweep, but they weren't going to win that series anyway, as we know. But we're going to get into all these. We got 2-2 series tonight. Obviously, some of that has changed now because of the injury, but we are going to talk it through, whether it's recap and preview in the next few games here on the NBA Playoff Banter podcast. Welcome. It's been fun. It's been fun, no doubt about it. If this is your first time listening to this NBA podcast, it streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com /Rope-A-Dope Radio. You don't have to go to Blog Talk and Rope-A-Dope and download the show directly there or listen to the browser if you don't want to. You can find the platform Rope-A-Dope Radio on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, really all across the board almost. We're also part of the Grilling True Sports Podcast Network, which can be found a whole lot of places. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegrillingtrue.com. It's basketball, football, boxing, baseball, hockey, everything in between. And real quick, if you're thinking about cutting the cord, maybe you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called AT&T TV. Plans start as low as $69.99 a month. Simple pricing, no hidden fees, no annual contract. You can stream it anywhere on any device. Of course, the cloud DVR is available. And if you sign up for the choice package and above, you get a free year of HBO Max. That's AT&T TV. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Marshall, my co-host, to start this puppy off. I know that Kevin Durant is not your favorite player to root for.
No.
I do know that. But 16 of 23, 4 of 9 from Trey, 17 boards, 10 assists, 49 points. Old man Jeff Green, 7 of 8 from 3. I mean, Griff even showed back up, not with rebounds, but points, dunks, I should say. Durant just went off, and, on the defensive end, we're going to talk about, some guys, sometimes you just go off, and there's not much you can do about it. Maybe that would have been just the case regardless. My co-host has a couple of things to say about that. The only player, though, to record 45, 15, 10 assists in a playoff game is that man they call Kevin Durant. So those blogger boys are going to be pissed off. And he played every damn minute of the playoffs of a game. And that's the first time since 2018 that someone did that. I think it's LeBron. But, dude, well, we'll talk about the injuries and all that. But right now, let's get into some of this. Let's bring in Marshall. The combination of Milwaukee having a huge lead. I mean, before they overtook it, like with 9 minutes or 6 minutes or some shit like that in the fourth, this is the first lead they had when they got up by a point since it was 2-0, Marshall.
Yeah, and so I got a new basketball coach I work with this year, the one I've been with for the past 3 years, who is an awesome friend now. Step down. So we get in there, and my other coach, who I've worked for a bit now, says, "Oh, did you watch the game last night?" And they're like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Man," the new coach is like, "Man, that Kevin Durant." And I was like, "Oh God, I can't stand him." She's like, "You hate Kevin Durant?" I'm like, "Yes, I do. I always have." And she's like, so it was a back and forth.
Well, you haven't always have. Hold on, you haven't always have. When he was in Oklahoma City, you didn't hate him.
Yeah, but then with the Draymond Green stuff, and even as a Warriors fan, I never liked the guy. I mean, I'm happy he won his titles, but never been a huge fan. But now the whole world's in love with him, and I'll give him credit. Hey, he came and showed out last night. My thing has always been he's always kind of just, like many in the NBA, he's always kind of had help with him. And last night there was Harden on the court, but Harden wasn't doing much help. So yes, I will give Kevin Durant credit for what he did last night. That was a hell of a performance, as much as I hate saying that. Clearly he wasn't ready game 4 when me and my buddies bet on him in Vegas, and his ass was chucking up. Chris, I shit you not. He, in the first quarter, he chucked up a 44-foot 3-point air ball because he thought he'd drawn a foul. He did that 3 times in game 4, had meaningless turnovers, looked completely lifeless, had no initiative at all to take over and carry the team when Kyrie got hurt. Something, you know what? Dude, the series is done. KD ain't going to do shit. When you bet a team, of course there's some bad karma. Yeah, he did step up and do some stuff, and he carried the team. So I'll give him credit. But Jeff Green, KD needed a little bit of help because, as we saw, Harden wasn't himself. He was out there. He did actually make a couple of nice passes here and there. I did recall making a few assists, which maybe the backup point guards on Brooklyn don't do. But when you have Jeff Green go 7 for 7 on threes, that's a sign you're supposed to win. So so Durant had a great night. Jeff Green had a flashback night. He's probably never gone 7 for 7 in his career. So you're thinking, okay, what did Milwaukee do? But if you're a Bucks fan, as we were talking about before the podcast started, you would have to be pulling out your hair after last night. Your first half, you had ball movement. You pretty much had a 10 to 17 point lead for the whole game. Then got down to about 12-9 in the second half, consistently 12-9. Brooklyn makes a run, they punch it back up. And then with about 3 to 4 minutes left in the third quarter, Chris, you saw the momentum really change. And what jumped out to me was just, and it wasn't just me, it was all the announcers, it was pretty much everyone, was how Milwaukee had played this beautiful offense of passing the ball and shooting threes and kind of just spreading it around to ISO ball. And it really killed them. It killed their momentum. And again, Budenholzer gets ripped quite a bit, but I think in a game like that last night, okay, yes, you'd say Durant deserves credit, and he does. But if you're Milwaukee, if you're a Bucks fan and you don't give a crap about Durant, you got to wonder, like, dude, what were we doing offensively? I would say the best play call they had in the fourth quarter was spread the court and let Giannis drive. And that's kind of tough now to do, Days, as we were talking about, Chris, because if you foul him, that's a 50% chance he's going to get 2 points. So the offense just disappeared. Middleton took some awful shots. Holiday had 2 air balls, hit the side of the backboard, and I mean, it was just the offense just fell off a cliff. And I'll throw this back to you, but everything that Durant did offensively, Chris, did not truly affect the Bucks offense. Like, we've said it all year. This Nets defense is not that good, and they're not. It's a simple, they're not that good. And you can say the pressure goes up in the playoffs. It sure does. But basically, in my opinion, I guess there's 2 ways to look at the game. Durant played out of his mind, but he did not play out of his mind to where the Bucks offense fell apart. So, again, I'll tip the cap. The dude went off. He had a Damian Lillard type night. But if you're the Bucks offense, that's just one of those losses where you're like, dude, we were up 17 in the second half. We had momentum, and then we crumbled. And these players you pay a lot of money for, a lot, just kind of disappeared. And you got home court, but man, that's a tough one to suffer because you could have had a potential game clinching home court game, Chris, and now your back is against the wall.
Yeah, home court in Game 6. The only thing you could say as far as, like, we talked about this too, like, why not try to put Giannis on Durant?
Sure.
Since he's fucking shrinking in the moment offensively, why not let him do what he fucking does? And, the first thing I said, well, what kind of foul problems was he in? Well, the guy guarding him was in major foul problems anyway. And he's short. You might as well put Giannis. I'm talking about the guy guarding him, of course, but you might as well put Giannis on him. It's your best bet. Maybe he can focus in enough and it motivates him enough. And maybe, he makes it tough. You got to make it tougher. And maybe it's just a little bit less points, maybe not, but you got to try to put Giannis defensively. But when we get to this Giannis stuff, and of course the last couple years, especially these last 3 now, when we get to the playoffs, we know they crowd him. They just say, hey, take that fucking 3, be my guest. But this year, it is the most exposed a top tier MVP caliber player has been, like, the most exposed. I can't think of another player that's been exposed this much. Now,
the only thing that comes to my mind,
Jokic,
Chris,
and Dirk, not making it past a round like people talk about, that's minor stuff compared to this, like as MVPs or whatever.
Oh, well, that's a different thing, which we can get to. But the one thing I think about is Shaq, and that how Shaq was a guy that obviously his free throw shooting game was affected, and you could probably play different defense on him. But Shaq also had the ability that even if you did foul him 10 times and maybe have him miss 7 free throws from the line and go 7 for 14, something like whatever. But Shaq was also going to dunk on your ass and score his points anyways. But as you said, you can definitely see Giannis is adjusting his game somewhat mentally, has to be somewhat mentally due to where he can go to the court, how he wants to attack, because that free throw line is not his friend right now at all. He was a 70% free throw shooter during the season, and now he's down to like almost, it appears to be in the 50s to mid 50s. So that really does change it, and that's the angle I thought you were taking right there, my friend.
Well, the thing with Shaq is that was only at the end of games, though. So it wasn't like it was the whole game he didn't know what the fuck to do. And another thing is, the very next game when they'd start to do the Shaq hack, he'd hit then. Then all of a sudden, because once you get at the free throw line, no matter how bad you are, if you go to the free throw line 14 times or something in a game, you're going to hit like a 5 out of 7 stretch. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so that's why he was able to kick that out of there and not let that bug him, and not, because after a while he would finally get hot and they just stopped doing it. And obviously the last 2 minutes of games, they tweak the rules and whatnot. But this is the whole game. I mean, we're now seeing him on breaks and partial breaks where he doesn't want to drive. And I get, like, have you ever seen a player of his stature in the league? Like, it's one thing to reset an offense and dribble back out, right, and run a play. That's not what he's doing, Marshall. He's literally like, okay, I'm dribbling. Okay, this isn't working. And we're talking, look who's on him. Do we think of the guy that's 8 feet off of him as this great defensive player? Fuck no, he's known for dunking. That's what he's known for. Now, I'll give him credit. He's at least add to his 3-point game and stuff. I'm talking about Griffith. I don't think I said his name. But he's added to his 3-point game, and, he's improved that way a little better. He's limited as well, by the way, and maybe that's a guy we could bring up in this scenario. But to dribble all the way back, Marshall, and get a running that I think it was game 2, but he got a running start and still got blocked. Well, shit, dude, if you can stand just a little bit away from the rim and it's easy to beat a guy to a spot and just stay there if he's running at you from 20 feet. It may suck taking the hit. I'm not saying that, but as far as beating him to the spot or timing him to his spot, it does make it tough. But, there's times on the break where now he's not going to dribble in. He took a fadeaway jumper when he had Harden on him. Last night, they didn't do this enough. We spoke about that, to put Harden in the mix. But when they did, Giannis didn't. He had him posted up. I'm going to fade on him. Why would you fade on Harden? But then I go back in my head and go, Chris, he's afraid to go to the line. So now you can't do shit from the outside, basically. Then you can't, the whole, drive and dump off gets beat up too, because you can't get all the way to the rack. It's like all of a sudden he's not nearly the threat. I've just never seen someone melt down so much in so many different ways, and then he misses the fucking pass. He drops the ball blatantly for an open dunk to tie the game. I just never seen this much of a meltdown. Like I said, this is not first happening now. The last 2 years, was a prelude to this, but this series, at least in Game 3 and Game 4, especially Game 3, they got the ball to him in the post much more often, and they need to keep doing that so he can dribble you down and just shoot over you. But I've just never seen a player shrink like this. Forget some of the numbers he's put up. This is crazy, dude. And Giannis seems like such a nice guy. You feel bad for him, but it's unbelievable. At some point, if this keeps happening, we can't keep calling him a top 5 player.
Yeah, my last point to move on from this, because we've hit it pretty hard of how the Bucks offense choked and KD had a good game, and Jeff Green pulled a game out of his ass.
Great game. He had a great game. Durant, great game.
He had a great. I think great. If you look up adjective of great in the dictionary, I would say great would describe.
He's a greater player than Stephon Curry too. Just so you know. Oh, my bad.
No, we've had that. We had that debate too, and I disagree. I think Curry's a better player than Durant, but we'll save that debate for a different show. The thing you can always tell normally when a team is kind of locked in and their coach is all locked in is so a team goes on a run, you call a timeout. what is the first play you drop out of the timeout? How does it go? And I think this was the first time the Bucks had cut the lead down to 2. So it'd been 7-7 for a couple minutes. I think around 5 minutes or so, Chris, it got down to 2. So I'm like, okay, what is Budenholzer going to drop? And the shot that ended up being taken was a Middleton driving into the lane, about 12 foot, turn around, 1 foot jump back floater. I was like, you just drew up a play that involved your guard dribbling into the middle of the lane and shooting a contested fadeaway 1 foot floater. Like, that's your play? It literally last night felt like their offense was like when you're playing a video game back in the day and you had like the faster guy in a hockey game or football game, you could just hit like turbo and like try to run up the basket really hard. And that was their offense. It was like, well, we have Giannis, or, well, we're just going to dribble really hard to the basket and hope that we get fouled or make a shot. It was sad. So I don't know. If you're a Nets fan though, that's one perspective we haven't looked at yet. You got to be pretty happy for now.
Right.
And injury bugs are hurting a lot of people in the East too. So it's not just y'all. But Harden, I will say this to wrap up our talk. I might rest Harden game 6. Like, I don't think he's re-injured anything worse. So,
but you can quickly.
Yeah, you could. And he last night was, I guess you could say, sufficient. Like, again, he's probably at least has some dribbling capabilities that other people don't. Again, you got to. So yeah, I would rest Harden game 6 and then use him 7 if you need to for 7.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe he could get away with doing what he did last night and just make good passes and stuff like that. Like you said, dribble out of certain scenarios, but you could even see him limited, like when he
played 43 minutes.
That's crazy. and remember that shot near the end where he traveled and he jumped up and his whole rhythm is off. Like, he's just not. You could tell he's not healthy. And like you said, giving him an extra handful of days before Game 7 potentially, I think would be smart. But the only thing I got to say to close that up, the Bucks defense had gotten way better. Now we all know that 86-83 game or whatever. They did get a lot. They did get away with it. It felt like 90s-ish. We'll call it early 2000s ball, where they did give you a little bit more leeway, clearly. I mean, they were beating them up. But even in, the other game, the Game 4, too, they were doing great. I mean, phenomenal. So I give them credit defensively and all that. And they were playing damn good defensively to get that huge lead and all that. But, yeah, it's crazy, dude. I can't believe Giannis. This continues to happen at this level now. It's like everything he's good at, he can't do now. And then when it's like, hey, dude, it's 9 feet, just pull up, dude, just pull up. Then he won't even pull up and take a jumper. It's just crazy, dude. Anyway, let's move on. Because you're right, we did go far on that one. The Clippers and Utah. Utah obviously got up on them. Game 4, LA came out really hot, 16-6, 30-13 at the end of the first. Playoff P and Kawhi were going off. Leonard had that monster duck down the lane. Did he hurt his knee then? I don't know, but they were up 55-29. Jazz made they cut into the lead. I think they got it to 8 or 10 or whatever on a 24-9 run, but it didn't matter much. With 4 minutes and change, though, they did pull Leonard, and he touched his knee a little bit. And whether they're like, maybe he just tweaked it, maybe. And next thing you know, it sounds like he's out for the rest of it now. It sounds like he's done. And I gotta say, after these 2 games, and even was it Game 1? I gotta say, now that I've seen these games play out the way they have, now originally I picked Utah, but even Game 2 was just downright ugly. But Game 1, I thought they had a chance to win that. Obviously playing great the last 2 games. Game 3, I mean, 132-106. But now they're done. They're completely done. And we got to remember, Utah is a good enough team to where they still could have won the series. I'm not saying they couldn't. And by the way, they haven't had, a guy that they need at times to settle stuff down, kind of like a secondary poor man's version of a Chris Paul in a sense, where he can hit the three, he can do the mid-range, he could be another ball handler, he could do a lot of stuff. Just a veteran quality player who's still going to return for them more than likely in Conley. So I got to say, though, these last two games and game one, I did feel, Marshall, that the Clippers were good. They found what they were good. They found it. And Morris was playing his ass off. They got that defensive grind back. But now it's like all for none, it feels like.
Well, now you got to play a team who has shown numerous times in the playoffs that when they hit their threes, they're really effing hard to beat. They're going home where they feel comfortable at. They have some of the craziest fans in basketball who always seem to say a lot of crazy stuff that gets their fans in trouble, but those are the minorities.
Yeah, crazy good and crazy bad.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of Jazz fans are great fans, but they always seem to get quite a negative press every playoffs. But anyways, so yeah, you have crazy home crowd, best three-point shooting team left in the playoffs, and now the Clippers' best player's out. So I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do. Like, I do recall last year after the Clippers choked out of the playoffs, so the Nuggets, Paul George said in the locker room after the game, like, I'm going to put the team on my back next year. Well, this is your chance. You got a chance now. And I don't think it's fair to expect him to. But, I mean, I suppose Paul George is your go-to guy now, which he's not been since Indiana. And you got Beverly, you got Morris. And you have a combination of all sorts of other players.
Beverly's played better, too. We mentioned that he's a key to their defense, and he's played better. I'll give him credit.
He has. It's just now who's going to go shot for shot with Mitchell or Bogdanovich, or when the Jazz are hitting threes, who's going to have that presence?
Oh, forget it.
Because at least Kawhi and Paul George, they really have fed off each other pretty well. Like, one gets hot, the other gets hot. Like, they've both been playing pretty good defense. Obviously, well, Kawhi is actually, when he wants to be, he's an elite defender. And there's even been moments where, watching that series, Kawhi's actually kind of drifted away out of a couple of sets sometimes. Like, if Paul George can get hot, dude, if I'm Kawhi, why not catch a breather for a couple of offensive sets in a row? So they really have worked good as a tandem. But now if you're the Jazz, okay, you got to be thinking, Chris, let's just lock down Paul George. And who the hell is going to beat us when we know we're going to hit our 12 to 15 threes at home? I don't see what the recipe is now to switch this around. I don't know. I mean, would it be impossible? No, but I don't know.
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. I will say at the end of last game.
And they put Kawhi on Mitchell, too, and made it harder for him, too, much like they did later in the series with Luka, putting Kawhi on Luka. So that was a little switch up too. I forgot to mention.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think this one will be over because I believe the news said Kawhi's out for the series. We're for sure out for Game 5, probably out for the series. So yeah, there's not much encouraging if you're a Clippers fan, which I'm not going to feel sorry for them, but they've definitely been a cursed fan base. Like I'm not even saying they would have won the series, but they were, as you said, catching it somewhat of a rhythm to get into. Yeah, hey, if you're Paul George, dude, this is legit your time to shine. If you could win this game in Utah, all those haters that you had on you last year, you could give all the crap right back to them. If you can pull off this win tonight, I will give you my credit myself, because that would be an impressive performance he's going to have to do to pull off against this Jazz team. So, as we've said all year, I've always thought the Jazz and Suns have been the two most consistent teams the whole season. Maybe not the best record, but consistently good basketball. And for better or worse, and reasons, that injuries do happen, but to every team. But, I mean, it looks like that's going to be your Western Conference Finals. So I do like that from a basketball perspective. I could care less about ratings because that doesn't affect me and you's pocketbook. And, no, there's no Lakers, there's no Curry. But the two best teams right now appear to be on track to place each other. And that's something as a sports fan you should enjoy and want to see.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, not getting ratings doesn't affect our pocketbook either, right? I mean, either way, you're right. But obviously, you would like to see the team's best players be healthy at the time of the playoffs. I don't think that's a
100%.
stretch.
Yes.
And when you look at, missing, clearly injured or missing games because they're injured, Anthony Davis, Luka was clearly injured for a little bit there. Braun never looked the same. Embiid, we're going to get to him in a second. Kawhi Leonard, Mitchell, Harden, Kyrie, CP3, Jaylen Brown, Kemba, Oladipo, obviously we know Murray, Trae Young for a second. Conley hasn't played much. I mean, when you set the record for most and obviously all-stars can be funky, because every year all-stars are a little different. We all know that. That's an argument to be had or whatever. But when you miss the most all-stars in the playoffs of all time in history and you're not even in the conference final, that's fucking psychopathic. That's crazy. So you're right. The ratings don't do anything for us personally. Well, I'll tell you what, it helps our podcast listens. I'll tell you that. So if you're talking about pocketbook listens, that's a little different. It does help our listenership if LeBron's in the playoffs. But I'm more worried about, I want to see the best go against the best when they're healthy. You're right, though. Injuries happen, but nowhere near like they are this year. I mean, this shit's on a different level. But, that's the year that we're having. It's going to be all back to normal next year. They already set out all the dates for next year. It's a normal run. And even in June, usually it's one game. I mean, we're looking at Game 7 if it is a Game 7 right now, usually. And we're not even in the conference finals. So it's funky. The schedule, even remember how they usually play out the first round where there's 2-day breaks between them and all that? Even that's different, which is leading to injuries and all that. But from a fan's perspective, it is fun, no doubt about it. But going to that Philly Atlanta Game 4 and that series in general, we'll close on the Sun stuff because obviously we know how that ended, but we still have that Chris Paul appreciation rant. And I say rant because he's been downgraded over the years to where it's like, why are you surprised he's doing this right now? You shouldn't be surprised. He's a stud. That's what he is. Is he a cheap player? Yeah. Just in the last series, he kicked his leg into Davis, which was clear as day. He was trying to hurt Davis further. But, he's not the first guy to do that. He'll tell you if he's just trying to help you out. Hey, tuck in your T-shirt, dude. Tuck in your T-shirt. Tuck in your jersey, bro. We don't want you to get fined or have a technical or whatever. But anyway, Philly, Atlanta. Philly got off to that great start in Game 4, shooting like 50-some%. Atlanta's shooting 28. They're up by double digits. They're throwing oops to Howard every other play. He's looking like it's Orlando days. But then you saw, it was like 53-38 or something like that. Atlanta rallied mini, then they got down, then they rallied again, and they were able to push it to like 62-49 at half. And then before you know it, it was 77-75. Hawks made a run. They were all on them. I think it was I can't remember who hit the three, whether it was Bogdanovich or Gallinari. I think it was Gallinari who, boom, all of a sudden they're in the game. Embiid was 0 for 7 in the third and struggled down the stretch. I mean, the Hawks were up with 5 minutes left, 94-92. They closed the game 61-40. They were throwing, speaking of oops to Howard, they were throwing oops to Capella. They just got it done. And in this series, you could tell Embiid's hurt. Once again, we're talking about injuries, and he's trying out there. He's going off one leg when he shouldn't. He got a bunch of rebounds and stuff, but you could clearly see his shots off because he just can't properly do what he normally does. But credit to Atlanta to staying in that game when it didn't look good for a while. They were down. I mean, they were down even 60-42 and cut it to 62-49. So they never got out of it all the way. And when you look at the box scores, you're like, hey, dude, they did their job on when you get Young to shoot 8 for 26, he shot 26 times, Marshall, and only had 25 points, but he had 18 assists, and that is a huge difference maker. Even Bogdanovic, 24 shots to get 22, 4 of 13 for Young, 3 of 11 from 3. Like, it was about they shot 36% from the field and 30 from 3. Like, it was about as good as you were going to get, and they should have won that game, and they didn't. And now you're in a situation where Ben Simmons is going to have to take more than 10 shots in this next couple games.
Yeah, and I know that Embiid got ripped going 0 for 12 in the second half. That's like the most shots ever taken by a player to not record a point. That's like a great player. Something like, I mean, he had an awful game, but the dude also did score.
He was 4 of 20 overall.
I mean, but the dude
21 boards.
He scored 39 in game 1, I think 40 in game 2. And the dude's playing on like a torn meniscus. Like, I'm not gonna rip him. He's playing hurt, and he's doing all he can. So he had an off night. Like, shit happens. Like, that's. I mean, yeah, obviously the guy does want to go for 12, and that probably won't happen again. But in his situation, he needs help from his teammates. And if they're as highly ranked of a team as they are, then he needs other people to help him. Because hell, we've always heard that Tobias Harris is this great basketball player ever since Philly signed him. And you rarely ever hear his name mentioned on ESPN or many talk shows. I mean, I'm not saying the guy's trash, but he's always been loved pretty highly. And same with Simmons. Like, dude, if your star is hurt, going out playing hurt, help him and help carry him a little bit. So, I mean, I'm not a Philly fan at all. I don't know as much from the media, but I'm not going to attack Embiid, who's been doing pretty damn well the whole series. But I think my biggest takeaway from this series is the fact that, Chris, Atlanta's just playing with, like, house's money. Like, you had a 50-50 shot to beat the Knicks, most people would say, unless you're like a diehard Hawks fan. And you did that rather convincingly. You're in a situation now where you have a young player in Trae Young who's becoming, like, kind of Reggie Miller-type villain. Like, and he's leading the team, despite being a young player. From what we can tell, he's kind of leading a young team. And they're really just kind of having fun. Like, they literally have nothing to lose. Obviously, every probably wants to compete to win. But I don't think many people would have seen this series being – well, I don't think many people would have seen Atlanta in the second round, let alone 2-2 with a top team in Philly. So I think that mindset of, well, guys, like, every time we go on the court, like, let's just see what we got. Like, what do we got to lose here? Absolutely nothing. We're a team that – hopefully we keep our core together. We're building off this for the future seasons. Like, Trae Young's going to improve. All those players you mentioned are going to get better as well. Like, they're missing Hunter, who's a good defensive player.
Especially where they were. They were lingering around 10th or 11th for a while too,
Yeah, they made the coaching change, and that really saved the season. So, I mean, you can talk X's and O's in the series, which obviously does matter. But I just think the mindset of Atlanta is like, dude, let's just go out and have fun. And if we beat Philly, like, okay. Like, we've seen that the Brooklyn Nets are kind of hurt and the Bucks got their issues. So, like, hell, maybe we can pull this one out. Who knows? Who's to say we can't make to the finals? I know that sounds a little preposterous. But if you can beat Philly and other teams have injuries, like, nothing's impossible. So, again, if you're Philly, much like we talked about Milwaukee last night, how many more years can the ESPN East Coast media say, God, love the Bucks team, love the Phillies team. I love these teams so much. And hell, they said about the Celtics forever. Now, Ainge and Brad Stevens finally jumped off the ship there. So all these same teams keep getting all the love. And last night could have been a different momentum night for the Bucks in their past 5-6 years of love. It could be a different series for Philly, but now they're 2-2. And, game 6 in Atlanta, that's going to be a fun one. So, some of these narratives don't change. So I'm going for Atlanta. I hope they find a way to pull it off. And yeah, hell, if your two best players shoot that bad, you'd assume, Chris, that they're both going to have better nights in Game 5. And Embiid is probably not going to be getting any better health-wise. I'm not saying the guy's going to go for 12 again. He probably won't do that again, but he's probably at like a 70%.
Post up Simmons.
Yeah,
time to post up Simmons then.
Simmons, do your thing. Like, help out your boys here. Like, it's time. And Tobias Harris, do something. Like, yeah, I think he gets paid around 25 to 26, $7 million a year.
He had a pretty good game, but yeah,
Okay.
I hear you.
But
I hear you.
So yeah, I hope Atlanta wins the series. I would not bet them to do it, but I sure hope that we're talking about Atlanta versus Milwaukee or Brooklyn for the finale in the East.
By the way, Donovan Mitchell is the only player in the NBA playoff history to score at least 30 points and make 5 threes in 5 consecutive games. He broke a streak of Curry in 2015, 4, which is crazy in itself. And he beat or he tied, I think, Malone's record of 6 in a row of 30. What is it? He now recorded 60 points. 30 points in 6 consecutive, tying the longest streak in Utah Jazz history. He's still not better than Malone, so calm down. And some of these points, I've talked about this, how it's phenomenal that you score points. But we know that the league itself, first of all, you take more threes, so you're going to score more points. And there's not one team, even at 101, as far as holding defense, offenses too. I think it's 104.5 is the best defense this year as far as points. So we can get carried away with some of this stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like, to get 30 points in 96 was tougher to get 30 it is now. But it's still just phenomenal. I want to throw that in there because I don't think we gave him enough love, even though he had a bad shooting night the other night or whatever. But we're going to close the whole kit and caboodle on the Suns. Now, we both picked them to win this series, but I don't think we picked them the way they were doing it. Obviously, Game 4, we could sit there and argue, should they have thrown Jokic out? That type of thing nowadays does get you thrown out, but you've seen worse not get thrown out too. So, I mean, it is what it is. They weren't going to win the series. I got news for you. They weren't going to win the series anyway. It is what it is. At least it was a fun, competitive game or whatever. But, yeah, they weren't going to win the series anyway. Once Porter's back tightened up, the series was going to be 5 games anyway. And who knows? Maybe they wouldn't have won Game 4. You can't just because Jokic plays. He played in the other 3 games too. So who knows? Obviously, Denver, though, getting to the second round without Murray. Porter might just be a guy that's always injured. Obviously, the beginning of his career started that way in Missouri and all that. So when you have back issues and all that, that just usually doesn't go away. So who knows? That guy's a young stud. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Gordon, if they can keep him around and whatnot, because they made that trade and whatnot. I love Denver's team in a lot of ways. And if they had Murray, this thing would go longer, period. I'm not saying they'd win. I'd still favor the Suns this year, but they're a different team with Murray. He scored 50 points in a series twice last year, so that tells you something about it, right? But the Suns' all-purpose game in general, defensively, we talked about Ayton last time, but what Chris Paul did when they needed stuff from him in this series, the mid-range game, he scored 35 points, the third player in NBA history to score 35. In a playoff game, 36 and older. That hasn't happened much. Chris Paul tied a record in a third quarter, hitting 6 mid-range jumpers. That's right. I know that's like sacrilegious to talk about the mid-range, but he tied for the most by any player in a playoff quarter over the last 20 seasons. The last to do it was LeBron. Like, this, every time they needed something, Marshall, he gave it to him. Oh, you need to calm down a little bit? Here's your mid-range in your eye. He had that 15 assists with no turnovers. He had all this crazy numbers. And it's not like he's putting up just disgusting numbers throughout, right? He's probably averaging like 18 or something like that. He's averaging – 18 points and 9 assists or whatever. He's just doing the job, though. Yeah, 16 points and 8.7 assists, but 50 from the field, 51 from the field, and 44% from the 3. And if you look at that, first player to have 15 points and 15 assists without a turnover in the playoffs since 2014. The last guy to do it, Chris Paul. The last guy to do it since 2008, if you go all the way back to the playoffs, was Chris Paul. This guy's had some really, really bad luck in the playoffs, and we'll get into that a little bit, but it is time to give this guy his shine. You cannot like someone off the court or some of the antics they do on the court. I get that. But you can't put that into the equation of how great a player is at what they do. And everybody does different stuff to a team, right? Or, that's what they give you certain things. And Chris Paul, it's just so nice for Chris Paul, to get this shine finally. I think it's been late, but finally, don't get me wrong. He's had some series where he didn't do as well, but there's not that many of them when you start looking back at that. A lot of it's been injury driven, and here we go. He's got COVID now. So maybe this is just going to add to this and all that. But, dude, it's really nice. The Suns in general, I feel like we gave him a bunch of shine from the first part of the series in our last show and all that. But Chris Paul has really showed his worth. And guy like the Clippers 2 stars and all these other 2 stars guys, or even a star guy, like the amount of catch and shoot threes or open shots that his guys get because of him. A lot of guys around the league are like, man, I wish I had him on my squad in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Suns are the most consistently best playing team in the NBA this year. And a lot of that's due to who's their floor general, and it's also helped people realize, maybe didn't realize, that Devin Booker is a really good basketball player. When you watched him play in the bubble last year, there was times where I was watching games where I was like, teams cannot guard Booker. And I mean, I've always known he's good. I think originally he was kind of a spot up shooter for 3-pointers, and I think his game has transitioned. But you have a superstar. I think you'd use the term superstar, a top 15-ish superstar on given voting polls. And now you have Chris Paul, who, as you listed, is one of the best all-around point guards in playoff history, just for how he leads the team and how he plays games differently. And because the majority of that Suns team is super young. I mean, Booker, I know he's been around for a while, but he's not super old. Aiton's young. Cameron Payne is young. Mikal Bridges is young. Cam Johnson young. Jay Crowder's a vet. So you have 6 young players on the team who need a leader, and whether they like him or not, they got to respect him. That's going to get on your ass and just help you do better. And how can't you want to go out there and play harder for a guy that's literally orchestrating how your team should be ran? It was a perfect fit. The GM's move to bring him in was just, that's one of the better sport acquisitions as we've seen in a long time, just to see how everything's played out for now. And you also have a perfect combination of a head coach and Chris Paul, because I didn't know this, but they were super close. When Monty Williams lost his wife, Chris Paul was there for him. I've heard those stories about that coming out this past week, so just how there's a family connection there, and you have a leader there. And again, talk about a team like Atlanta, who I said it's playing with house's money. I don't think many people thought the Suns were going to be in the Western Finals. I do know that I remember talking about it when you and I talked about last year, Chris, the way they finished in the bubble. We're okay. This team is showing pieces, and there's some flashes, and you get Chris Paul, and you're okay, let's see what they got. But I don't think many Suns fans even thought, dude, we're in the finals. Holy shit. And we could be the favorites, or probably should be, or I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll see where the COVID thing,
Yeah. But potentially, if Chris Paul's on the court, I mean, this is a team that swept the Jazz 3-0. And if you got to play a Clippers team without Kawhi, you're for sure going to be favored there. So this is a Suns team who's been orchestrated by a really talented point guard who pushes all the right buttons and can kind of be that a-hole leader, but kind of like Draymond. He's a guy you love on your team. And, I mean, obviously he's more talented than Draymond, but that same kind of mindset. You need that alpha dog on your team that's going to get after it for you. and you can't help but want to stand up for him. And I even thought Booker did that too. Like when Bridges got swiped across the face, or Cameron Payne, I forget who it was that Jokic kind of just busted in the nose. Like Booker was right there for him. Like I think this team is gelling together faster than people expected, but the way they play is like can't help but love it. And lastly, to kind of finish on my son's little preach here, because they kicked the Nuggets' ass and unanimous MVP. He sure came to play. But anyways, Jay Crowder, a dude who he is probably the most one of the most like unknown really good basketball players that like the media doesn't
got
touch
some
on
Iggy vibes to him. Got some Iggy Dollar vibes to him all of a sudden.
I was literally just gonna say he reminds me of Iggy for the Dubs, because Iguodala was that defensive lockdown dude that can hit the corner threes, and he's an all-around player. He's not quite the dirty like Draymond or Chris Paul, and he's not quite as flashy as like Clay and Steph or like Booker and CP3, but he just does it all. Like the guy plays defense, he hits threes, he's kind of that good veteran leader. So you have two veteran leaders with a ton of playoff experience, and then you wonder why these other 5 to 6 guys I've named on the Suns who are all like growing up. Well, no wonder they're progressing. Dude, you kind of have a great mixture of leadership. But yeah, Jay Crowder, and that was one of the biggest things people said all year for the Heat was, well, dude, we lost Jay Crowder, and Iggy's a year older. Like, yeah, you just mentioned Iguodala, and Iguodala and Crowder were on the same team. Well, no wonder the Heat made a good run, along with a guy like Jimmy Butler and CP3. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of parlays I've just mentioned uneffortlessly between between the Heat and the Suns, and yeah, no joke, we're in it. But also, they're playing with tons of confidence. I think Atlanta might be thinking, okay, guys, we have a chance. I think the Suns walk in every game saying, dude, this is our damn game. Like, we don't care home or road, the way they're playing. Like, I know they had a couple hiccups against LeBron, and that happens to plenty of people. But This Suns team is just locked in, and you're getting a little time to rest. Hopefully the Chris Paul thing doesn't linger, because obviously they do need him. I don't think he'll be out for long, but who knows how that protocol goes. I remember when my Nationals started the season this past year with baseball, Juan Soto was like out for a while, but then it turned out he actually had a false negative test, and like you never quite know just because this is a new situation. But if Chris Paul is vaccinated and just happened to catch it, like you don't think there'd be any long lingering issues that would keep him out for a long time. Obviously, you'd hope not as a Suns fan, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that story as it goes. But if Chris Paul is healthy, the Suns have a great chance of making it back to the finals, just because I think they're the best team left in the West. I think the Jazz put up a lot of fight against them. But yeah, dude, you're right. All those stats you read off, and you combine them with a young / couple vets on the team, like, dude, they're just playing with house's money. So they're on a roll. It's fun to watch them play, and I hope they continue to win. They've been the most consistent team all year, and I hope they make their way to the finals.
Now, Jokic, the first game, didn't have a great game in the series. They were getting their ass kicked, so they only played 30 minutes in the game 2, but he had 24, 13, and 6. Game 4, he had 32, 20, and 10. The dude had 32 points, 20 boards, and 10 assists. And he was on his way to 22 and 11 with 28 minutes left, and he got thrown out in the third. So let's calm down on, he didn't really show up. In the second, he didn't have his second best player with him. So let's calm down a little bit on that. I got to push back a little bit about that. But back to Paul real quick. And this is now, we give each other a little. I actually give most of the cheap shots, to be honest, when it comes to Golden State. Just randomly, just for fun, like the little Steph Curry things and stuff like that. I think he's a brilliant player. That team, once they got Durant, I lined them up against we went all over that, some of the top teams and how they match up, and they were phenomenal, no doubt about it. But let's not forget, okay? And this is what pisses me off here. And I wasn't a huge Harden fan for a long time. Then he brought his game to a level that could not be denied. Now, you could say, defense is still just average at best, sometimes really mediocre, of course, and poor, whatever. But when you look at that Houston squad, okay, they were up, and injuries happen. We know that. We're aware of that. But what I didn't like is how they did. The media just barely brushed upon, and it kind of goes down in history as, I mean, Chris Paul did miss some games down the stretch of that, but it is what it is, and that was a failure. They basically Houston failed. They look at it now that Houston failed when they built that team. We know a couple years before that it was all offense, right? And them and Golden State had the most to do with changing the league when it came to three-point shots and how they got them and all that, right? Houston passed the fuck out of the ball, though, too. Let's not act like they did. Because, yeah, well, you have Harden dribbling a lot, but look at his assist rate. So let's just calm down a little bit on that, okay? But my point is that Durant, when they had Steph, Durant, the whole squad, that starting lineup, the starting five was ridiculous, okay? And that Houston club that got better as they added defenders, right? Ariza and that dude from UCLA, I can't remember his damn name now. It's two M's. It's whatever. They got defensively sound, right? They were one of the best, if not the best teams that year in defense. They're up 3-2 on that fucking stellar squad where you could put them in the top 10 at least all time. At least top 10. That's being nice, right? They were up 3-2 on that squad. Didn't have Chris Paul for Game 6, Game 7. We know injuries happen. I'm not taking anything away from Golden State that year. I'm actually giving them love, calling them a top 10 team all time, okay? But the way it was brushed aside over the years after that, and Houston failed. They failed. How can you say when you're up 3-2 and you miss Chris Paul in those games and act like that was a failed friend? They almost beat, and you could make an argument that they would have won one of those games. That's not some kind of weird out of left field argument. And remember, they were up big in both the games. And remember, who do you need when you're 0 for 27 from the three-point line? You need Mr. Mid-Range. You need to call – he's going to calm the team down. He's going to hit a couple mid-ranges. Like, that always pissed me off that they just brushed aside that Houston squad as if, oh, dude, they fucked up. That was a failure then. They could have they would have won the chip had they have beat them, period. So this whole shit about that bugs me. And like I said, it took me a while on Harden. It took me a long time to respect his game like you had to at some point. But that's what pisses me off the most about the Chris Paul stuff. We know he's been injured. We know it happens, but don't act like it couldn't have been a lot different. And don't call that Houston foundation where they built it all the way to that point a failure when you could have almost beat a top 10 squad of all time if you had Chris Paul. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to get that out once again. I said that years ago, but now here we are caught up, and everybody's giving them love when they should have been like, you can't call Houston a failure franchise at that time because look what the team they built. They built a team that could have got over the hump, period. Now, maybe they wouldn't have. That's fair. We know that they didn't. But without Chris Paul, to act like he's not a difference maker in those two games, especially when you're 0 for 27, give me a fucking break. The guy's a cheap shot artist. No doubt about it. That shit goes back to his college games. Remember, he kicked that dude in the nuts. I get all that. But you can't take away how good players are, just like Draymond Green. You can't, sure, sometimes he has struggles with the three. We get it. But you can't take it just because you don't like him. You can't take away his value. Okay. Anyway, any last things before we shut this thing down? I had to get that Chris Paul rant out. I've been storing that puppy up, Marshall.
No, just one side note. But Scott Brooks of the Wizards, they parted ways. I'm not sure why, but and I know this is not hell, they made the playoffs, but that dude, I wonder why, because that dude literally maybe did the best coaching job of the year. I know that his team wasn't, but they were like 13 games under 500. They ended up making the playoffs. it just amazes me is they had the biggest NBA COVID bust, situation, whatever. And like that team like finished the year playing like at a 65% winning clip. And besides Bradley Beal and Westbrook, who the F can anyone name across this country on that team? So if he's open to coach again, and I know it's only a one season sample size, but it surprised me a bit just because that dude had a really, really good year for probably just what you could say was maybe the best coaching job of the whole season. So I just thought that was kind of odd to see that he left.
Yeah.
Again, who knows? But that was just odd. That dude had a tremendous season and I don't know. Yeah, it just caught me off guard. And also the Pacers fired their head coach. That was a couple weeks ago. And also Stan Van Gundy today got fired, which that one I saw coming because you have the pieces in New Orleans to be scary, freaky good. But their team was really bouncing around all like crazy. And the other thing I heard today through ESPN was for like our last part of coaching news wrap the show, is that there's some people waiting to hear about if the Milwaukee Bucks will be needing a new head coach if they don't advance.
Yeah.
So dude, if you want, a lot of times head coaching jobs aren't that sexy to take over. If you could walk into Milwaukee with that roster, maybe a different coach. Oh,
different vibe. Yeah.
And Portland too. Portland, there's talks that Portland wants to interview D'Antoni. So people are like saying like, is Lillard gonna average 47 a game? Can you imagine D'Antoni's offense with Portland and McCollum and Lillard? Oh shit, Chris, their over unders are gonna be like 270. so we will see. But nonetheless, hopefully these injuries stop because we've had enough of them, and we have a lot of.
We got to stop. We got to stop these things. No more.
We still have good basketball to enjoy. And so 2 games tonight. But yeah, we will see. We will have a Western Conference Finals coming up shortly, and the Eastern Conference will be. Well, they still got a ways to go on that. So thanks as always for the support. We appreciate it. We hope you are having a great summer and staying cool a little bit. It's hot across the whole country. So until next week, the boys are out. Have a good one. Peace.